I don't know. Say it with me. I don't know. Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. Now, I'm glad that we have the desire to understand the world. That results in all sorts of great stuff. We want to know everything. We're humans. We're curious. And maybe it's our culture. Maybe it's just humanity. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. Suddenly, I know that I don't know. But somehow everyone else seems to know. They all know differently from each other, but they all seem to know. What I'm saying is nobody's opinions are correct in the world. And yet it's impossible not to tie your opinions to your concept of self. And often people tie those things so closely together that they begin defending their guesses as if they're defending their very lives. In a way, they are. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 192 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Bob Pondillo and I interview Mary D. She's right here in the Nashville area, so she was here in the studio. She has quite a journey to share through Catholicism, alcoholism, various Protestant and evangelical churches, and strangely, and unique to any other guest on this podcast, hypnosis. Even though Mary has been involved in many churches over the years, she was never compelled to worship a God. So in some ways, she's not our typical guest who had a traumatic departure from faith, but rather has a very generous regard for people who need religion. Sometimes we ex-Christians need a break from the veracious animosity we feel towards religion, and maybe even those that adhere to it, and give our fellow humans some slack as they fight their own battles and navigate their own storms. I had an epiphany this week, and it's a little embarrassing to admit it, because it's going to sound like common sense to most of you. It has to do with something that happened to me when I left the faith. God's grace toward me was appealing, because I had come to dislike myself, and the message of someone forgiving me, and giving me a clean slate, and empowering me to change was extremely appealing. I think this is why the gospel appeals so strongly to people in alcohol and drug addiction or convicts in prison. But on a smaller scale, I had acted out in elementary school and middle school in ways that were inappropriate and shameful, that give me today a large cringe factor when I think of them. And by high school, I was a prime candidate for God's antidote to self-hatred. After all, in His holiness, He had all the right to hate me, and in fact, without Christ's sacrifice, He did. And here He is offering me unconditional love, an eternal blissful life with a new body and a perfect nature. Sign me up. And Paul in the Scriptures, also a self-loather, prescribes emptying myself, becoming less so he could become more, casting off the old nature and fleshly desires for a new nature and a renewed mind. Throw in a powerful plan for my life that He would guide me through, and what's not to like? Well, as you know, that was all bullshit, and we ended up giving our agency and personal accountability over to an imaginary, non-existent deity. So as a result, we often swing wide, like a pendulum, to the opposite pathology. You may have heard me say many times on the podcast, I will never apologize again for being human, or being Cass Midgley. And I set out to embrace myself and love myself very thoroughly. And as usual, the healthy place is somewhere in the middle. as debasing yourself as a Christian or exalting yourself as a naturalist. The moderate space is acknowledging that we're imperfect and in fact capable of some pretty damaging behavior, damaging to ourselves and to our relationships, often those we love most. And unchecked, our nature can truly fuck things up. So what's the truth here? Well, stay with me for a second. We all have personalities, and these are the deeply ingrained patterns of behavior and the lens through which we perceive, relate to, and think about ourselves in the world in which we find ourselves. Our personalities are flawed. Mental health professionals have defined 10 personality disorders as listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or otherwise known as the DSM. The 10 personality disorders are as follows: paranoid, schizoid, schizotypal, antisocial, borderline, histrionic, narcissistic, avoidant, dependent, and obsessive-compulsive. And I invite you to investigate your own personality and these disorders to see where your imperfect personality errs on the side of one or more of them. Keep in mind that a full-blown diagnosis of a disorder from a professional is far, far different and more extreme than simply recognizing that you find you are mildly influenced by some of these, and of course you are. No one is immune to their influence because no one is perfect. This is a spectrum, and we all would benefit from some self-awareness of our kryptonites. If we're aware that we have this or that tendency, then we would benefit and our loved ones would benefit if we would clue in to what they already know, and that is we're all a little bit crazy. Being sensitive to your potential pathology could save you and others a lot of pain and heartache, because you can rein it in when you start to feel it creeping up in you. For example, my therapist told me this week that I'm not so much narcissistic as I am histrionic. Well, I'd never heard the word histrionic. The word itself means an actor, overly theatrical or melodramatic in character or style, exaggerated dramatic behavior designed to attract attention. For a diagnosis of histrionic personality disorder to be given, 5 or more of the following 9 symptoms must be present. But before I self-diagnose on the air down this dark path, here's a bit of comic relief from my hero, Bill Murray, from the movie Groundhog Day.
How about you? What do you want?
What I really want is someone like you.
Oh, please.
Well, why not? What are you looking for? Who is your perfect guy?
Well, first of all, he's too humble to know he's perfect.
That's me.
He's intelligent, supportive, funny.
Intelligent, supportive, funny. Me.
He's romantic and courageous.
Me also.
He's got a good body, but he doesn't have to look in the mirror every 2 minutes.
I have a great body, and sometimes I go months without looking.
He's kind, sensitive, and gentle. He's not afraid to cry in front of me.
This is a man we're talking about, right?
He likes animals and children, and he'll change poopy diapers.
Does he have to use the word poopy?
Oh, and he plays an instrument, and he loves his mother.
I am really close on this one. Really, really close.
Okay, so here are the 9 symptoms of histrionic personality disorder. Number 1, self-centeredness. Uncomfortable when not the center of attention. That's me. Number 2, constantly seeking reassurance or approval. It's not constant, but I'll give it half a point. Number 3, inappropriately seductive appearance or behavior. Not me. Number 4, rapidly shifting emotional states that appear shallow to others. Kinda. Maybe half a point, so we're at 2.5. Number 5, overly concerned with physical appearance and using physical appearance to draw attention to self. Man, not only am I a 0, I'm a -1 on that. So I'm going to go back to 1.5. Number 6, One's opinions are easily influenced by other people, but difficult to back up with details. Not so much. I could be wrong, but I'm sticking with not me. Number 7, excessive dramatics and exaggerated displays of emotion. Yeah, a little bit. All right, we're back up to 2.5. 8, tendency to believe that relationships are more intimate than they actually are. That's kind of true recently, so I'll give it a 3.5. Number 9 is highly suggestible, easily influenced by others. Nope. So that puts me at a 3.5, at worst 4.5. So I'm not at the level of disorder, but close enough to arouse some self-awareness and some presence of mind to rein it in when I feel it arising. Keep in mind, for these symptoms to be considered a disorder, they must cause significant impairment or distress in the individual. Now, something that is not on the list of pathologies here is lying. And I've known some pathological liars in my years. Maybe you have too. They seem to get a rush from wowing people with their life stories or whatever story, and they embellish a little to get their listeners to that over-the-top place of gasping and awe. Today's guest, Mary D's story, is like that at times. It's so brutal at times and strange that I couldn't help but think, is she embellishing? But I only met her the day of the taping, so I don't know. But I know this. We're all a little crazy. We're all needy. We're all insecure. And if we're aware of our own shadow side, we're much more likely to sense when we're tempted to resort to these lower demons of our nature, which will only end up hurting those we love and ourselves. And unlike our past religious lives, where we'd either try to cast out the demon or try to get closer to God to dispel this darkness, or pray harder, we now know that it's up to us to be good, to do the right thing, to care and stay connected and compassionate and empathic with those around us, to rein in those behaviors which spring from fear, insecurity, self-pity, resentment, or victimhood. We have what it takes to do the right thing, to take the high ground, to say yes to our yin-yang nature, and thus be empowered to say no to that which disconnects us from our fellow, flawed, human neighbors. We taped this conversation on February 11th, 2018.
We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts.
Also, we offer these podcasts freely, and your support truly makes a difference, keeps us going. You can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge a monthly donation through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or you can leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode was created by the Barry Orchestra. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
Hello. Hey, Mary.
Just like you do on the podcast.
Yes. Why is that?
I don't know.
How are you, dear?
Nice
Oh,
to
nice
meet you.
to
I'm just
meet
like,
you as well.
I want to hug you and stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like I know you guys.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, good.
All right.
So, are you hearing okay? Can you hear?
And,
Okay.
and the closer you can get to the mic, the better. It's fine.
Yeah.
Make yourself comfortable. But
Yeah. Hello, testing one. Hello.
So you're 2.5 years clean and sober or whatever, right?
Yep, 2 years sober, or 2.5 years sober.
All right.
Wow. So when
After-
you went to the club last night, you didn't drink? You had water? Or
No, I had club soda.
Really? Mm-hmm. Nothing in it?
Just
Well,
a
of
little
course not.
twist of lime.
Oh.
A little spritzer.
Okay, fine. So, Mary Dunn, a good Catholic girl. Why in the world? But you're considered a lapsed Catholic now, right? or does that mean anything to you?
Well, it doesn't, and that is the truth. I always start with the joke that I'm a recovering Catholic.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I was a Catholic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was an altar boy. And no, I wasn't. Because that's the next question, everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience with priests they were grumpy and old.
Yeah.
And, didn't really care too much about me. But that's just,
My brother was an altar boy, and I think he had a really good experience
yeah.
with it.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
But my dad wasn't around. My dad was an alcoholic, and he wasn't around much during those years, and so I think it was good for my brother. Oh. And but yeah, my mother has a Spanish background, so I was born in Spain, and so all of her family is Catholic as far back as you can go.
Catholic. Yeah.
And then yes, you're right. Dunn is a very Irish name.
It sounds very Irish.
My sister's name is Megan Riley Kay.
Oh, Megan.
I'm sorry, Megan Kelly.
Megan Kelly.
Her daughter is
not the Megan Kelly on TV.
No.
Okay.
No, and it's funny because I was going to say, I'm not a bit nervous, and I'm realizing I'm completely nervous because my sister's name is Erin Kelly Kay, and my niece's name is Megan Riley Kay. I got all their names all
how did that happen? If you were from Spain, is it because your mom?
My dad was in the Air Force, and my mom's father was in the Air Force, and that's where they met there.
Okay,
and,
what city in Spain?
Sevilla.
We're going to Barcelona this summer.
Very cool. I heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be.
Have you been there? Or?
No, there has been a family dream that we all go back and visit, and we just haven't done it. I've got pictures of myself in front of cathedrals when I was about 2. I left when I was about 2.5.
Yeah.
So I don't remember it.
Yeah.
But
still, how cool. How cool.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do 23andMe. You don't have to do your, what do they call it?
I actually want to do that.
Yeah,
I
me
really
too.
do want
in
to
fact,
do that.
we are going to do that.
Yeah,
my wife.
Edie doesn't listen to the show.
No.
She can surprise her.
Yeah, we're going to for Valentine's Day. We're surprising
very cool.
each other. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So anyway, well, that's great. So Catholic, but no longer, and now you've moved into other areas of, or maybe we should explore why you moved out of Catholic. Well,
I took a long journey. In fact, I'm still in the process, and I guess we all are.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What I think happened for me was that, we were Catholics, but we didn't show up at church unless we were near my grandmother, and she expected it. And she was not. It was never, you should do this. It was just kind of always, we want to go because we're at grandma's, and so
got to keep up the appearances. And stuff.
Yeah, and it didn't mean a whole lot to me.
It's a cultural thing for you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I really wasn't, and that's the thing. A lot of people I think that don't come from the Catholic tradition don't realize that we're really not taught Bible and things like that. We just get whatever they give us.
Yeah. Yeah, the priests are always like, don't worry about it, but we'll tell you what's in the Bible. Yeah. You don't got to read that.
Exactly, and we'll explain
that Martin
we'll
Luther stuff. Yeah, right.
So it really didn't mean anything to me, and the pomp and circumstance was beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I did have a few experiences where we would go to like a guitar mass,
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was kind of cool,
Sure.
Hey, they're actually playing guitars in here.
So were you ever really devout?
No, we never even attended on a regular basis.
Okay, so
until, and this is interesting. I just had a revelation here. Around the time of our confirmation, of course, we had gone through all the sacraments up to this point. Mm-hmm. When it was time to be confirmed, all of a sudden, we were going to catechism, and we were showing up for church every Sunday. I never really thought about it then, but I'm like, what was that all about? And I realize now it was, my mother probably had this moment where, oh no, I haven't done all this stuff, So we did that, and we actually, it was really strange. We were going to a church, St. Anne's Catholic Church in Bristol, Virginia. We lived, in Bristol, Tennessee. So in a very small town, there weren't a lot of Catholics there. We were considered foreigners because we were from Chicago,
And Catholics are papists. People don't like the Catholics sometimes, especially in the South.
Yeah, well, one of my first rubs with, what religion was all about was I had a dear, dear friend who, they were Pentecostal. I didn't know what that was back then. We called her a holy roller.
Yeah.
But we got really close. Her dad was a hardcore alcoholic, and so was my dad, and we were both really struggling with life in general. And one day she came to me and she says, my mom told me that Catholics say that if you're not Catholic, you're going to hell. And I'm like, well, that's not true. I mean, because I didn't know anything about it. I said, that's crazy. I've never heard anything like that. So I go home, and I'm like, what's this about Catholics believing other people are going to hell? And luckily, my parents were very open-minded, and they were like, well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what they teach. And I'm like,
One
that's
true religion.
crap, you know?
Sure.
And I think that was maybe the first time, because before I didn't really have I wasn't really tied to anything mentally, but that's when I really started to think, this is BS, you know?
Yeah.
And I never even had any thought that any of this stuff might be true. I don't know what I just didn't think about it, I guess.
You were a kid, though. You were a little kid, though, right?
Yeah. But I was a very sensitive kid. I mean, I was one of those that when I was 5 years old, I would see things and I would think, that's just not right.
A strong moral compass.
At an early age. And I think part of that came from the alcoholic upbringing. My dad was physically abusive to my mother.
Ouch.
And we saw it a lot.
Wow.
But my mother also, and there are things that I feel like, I hate to use the word should, but shouldn't say because there's somebody else's to say.
Yeah.
But my mother did things that, weren't great either. And she was physically abusive to us, and she'll tell you that to this day, So
Are they either still alive?
My father passed about 5 years ago. My mom is still alive. She remarried, and that husband has since passed, and she's now... It's so funny to say my 70-year-old mother has a boyfriend, but she does.
Yeah,
and it's great.
I get that.
It's really great.
Yeah,
He's
my
a great
dad,
guy.
in his 80s, had a girlfriend, so after my mom passed. So it just sounds to me just flawed people. Just people with flaws like all of us have,
Yeah.
Although clearly they manifest themselves in very sad
and I
ways.
think because of that, I have this lifelong attraction to flawed people in a good way.
Like a Messiah complex, or like you want to
help
save them?
Save 'em?
No. Actually, I'm a coach, and so I like to help people figure out.
What kind of coach?
A life coach.
Okay.
No kidding.
And I do other things. I'm actually a realtor, and a friend of mine and I have a catering business. We just catered a concert a couple nights ago, and we're into music. I say we're. She and I sing together, and then I do some singing. I actually am a professionally paid singer now.
No
Okay.
kidding.
I had my first paid gig back in December.
Well, you have a very pretty voice, so that's...
Oh, thank you.
Speaking voice, I mean.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fear around that. I had a lot of self-loathing, a lot of anxiety.
How many siblings you got?
I have one full brother who is also, just because we've been talking about it, sober 3 years.
Okay.
And then I have 2 half-sisters, one by my mother, one by my dad. And then I have a stepbrother and a stepsister that grew up with us. I mean, to me, they were just my brother and sister.
So where is everybody? Like
Florida, North Carolina. I've got a brother here in Murfreesboro and a sister here in Murfreesboro. And then my half-sister here has 2 children.
Where's your mom?
She's here in Murfreesboro.
Okay, what brought you here? From Chicago?
We came from, and I say Chicago loosely, we moved every year that I was in school. I was
Military.
never, alcoholism.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
my dad got out of the military when we came here, but I don't know how much you know about the alcoholic abusive
Not too
situation. They tend to, when things get hairy, we pull up stakes and move. And so every time things got, either we weren't paying our rent and we were going to be evicted, or somebody got wind that my mom was getting beat up, or something like that.
Yeah.
We would pull up stakes and move. So I went to a different school every year. I was in school until we hit like upper middle school.
Yeah.
My mom and dad were having a really, really rough time in their marriage. I think money was bad, and
Well, his alcoholism probably cost him, like he'd lose jobs. Like,
well, what was interesting? My dad was a rock star. I mean, he was a salesman and
Charismatic.
He did, and he did so. And I'm wearing a bracelet right now that says "Love you, honey, Dad." It's in my dad's handwriting, and I was.
did he give it to you? You had it made.
My daughter-in-law had it made for me for Christmas this year.
Wow.
And so, my dad and I were very close. He wasn't around a lot, but when he was, I mean, we were like
You
this.
love Daddy.
Yeah, and I think I am a lot like him, and I didn't see that back then. But anyway, so he was very entrepreneurial, and always it was either feast or famine. He was top salesman, we were making a lot of money, or he was really headlong into a drunk, and he always managed to keep a job. He never, usually what happened was other circumstances were out of control, and we just had to get out.
Sounds like a salesman, doesn't it? Somebody that really knows how to ingratiate themselves and play the game and that type of stuff.
So he was an angry drunk?
He was, he was a happy drunk until he hit a certain level, and then he became an angry drunk. And my mother had learned the fine art of provoking him. So, and like I said, that's stuff I won't go into, but I inherited that same thing. I'm a dance on the tables kind of drunk, and then I get to the crying and, you did this to me, you did that to me, and then it's throwing things. And
have you by chance seen the movie or read the book Glass Castle?
No.
Okay. Just
who's it by?
It's kind of a dysfunctional family. The dad's an alcoholic, or What about the TV series Shameless?
Haven't seen that either.
Okay. Yeah. That's
you're giving me things to look for, though.
Yeah. That's a good one, too.
Yeah.
William H. Macy plays a drunk dad, and they're just a dysfunctional bunch. And
wow.
And of
it's
course,
kind of
funny, sad.
Yeah, funny.
That's
sad.
life. That's
it
my
is
life.
really life. Yeah.
I think when you're, if somehow there's comfort or something in watching people whose lives are more fucked up than your own. It's like, even though it's drama and scripted and stuff, it's like, oh man.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I'm sure there's probably a lot in there I can relate to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Glass Castle was written. I mean, true story written by a girl, and they uprooted and moved all the time, and I recommend the movie at least. Yeah,
and the uprooting constantly. I think what it did for me is it helped me become a leader, and there are times that I'm really happy about that, and there are other times that it sucks because one of the things I know about myself is I can walk into any situation and immediately, I'm not one of these bossy types, but I can come in and just take charge. There's something that needs to be done, I can do it. I'll handle it.
Well, I think there's something about going into a school and just kind of thrown in there with these, and schools, especially high schools or middle schools, can be a bit of a jungle socially. Yeah, everybody's insecure and everybody's, competing for whatever.
Right, hormones or stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you go in and you kind of, you have whatever experience it is, probably maybe a successful, or you make friends, or you get by, and then you next year start over again, Groundhog Day, and you do it, and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, and all the while it's just reinforcing in you, I can do anything, I can walk into any situation, and I can draw up a boundary for people that I'm uncomfortable with. I can engage with people I am. I've got all the skills in my toolbox to navigate all social circumstances or whatever. Yeah,
and I couldn't articulate that back then, but that was the reality. But what I did tend to do is I shielded myself from everybody.
Okay.
So I was always pretty much a loner.
Yeah. Well, how about it? Just like guard your heart, so like you don't let people in because you're going to be leaving in a year.
Yeah, and I was so fearful because I constantly, I think we all in a new situation, we want to put our best foot forward. So every year I was putting my best foot forward and putting my best foot forward. And it was like there was never a chance to make a mistake or to be human. I always had to be this thing. And nobody put that on me. I realized that
was you.
That was just, I had to, and so I've carried that for years, and even now I struggle with that. I have to walk in, and I have to put my best foot forward, and I have to make
a good impression.
Yeah, and I can't let people see this, and I'm very flawed, as we all are, but, I found myself in certain situations, I don't want... And I was just listening to something about compartmentalization that you talked about. And it's like, oh my God, I'm like the queen of compartmentalization.
Yeah. I think women are much better at it than guys.
Probably so.
Yeah. My wife's amazing. The way she can turn things off. And I'll just chew on it and stuff. Yeah.
I'll walk into a situation and, my life might be complete chaos at home. And I walk in and I'm together and I'm, on, and I also, there are so many parts of my life that, as an example, being in real estate, I don't want all the people I work with to know everything about me.
Right.
And and living in the Bible Belt, you know, my kids, it's so funny. My kids will say things, and I tell them, I'm not one of these mothers that, you know, we've got to be this, we've got to be that, but I do tell them, you know, we do live in the Bible Belt, and, you know, like one of the conversations that comes up a lot with my I have a 15-year-old that has autism, and he's very open, and we taught him to be that way. But with his autism, it makes it a little more difficult for him to understand when to rein it in.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I've told him at times, I said, you know, if you go to school and you talk about X, Y, Z, just know that you might get, you know, a reaction like this or like that. And I tried to protect him more when he was younger, but now that he's a little bit older, I'm like, I have to let him find out what that feels like if he oversteps someone else's boundary.
Like when somebody says, "Oh, what church do you go to?" or something, or what do they say in the around? Don't they do that?
Yeah,
yeah. Or
kids do that to each
what
other?
religion? Well, it is hilarious because there's so much that you guys have talked about on the podcast and this morning, and it's like, oh my God, I've got to tell them this, got to tell them that. We had an incident where my 28-year-old now, he was 16 at the time. He was really struggling with some stuff, some personal stuff, and emotionally, I think. And ultimately, he ran away from home.
Wow.
And he was going to Hume Fogg, which is, you know, an academic magnet school. And one of my reasons for sending him there was I thought, you know, he's going to get some thinking outside the box there. And ultimately, we found that it was actually very conformist.
Oh.
And he was miserable. And I was sorry that I sent him there, but I'm like, here we are, you know. So he's a junior, and he starts having these issues, and it was, I mean, he was cutting himself, and, you know.
Dear.
So he ran away from home, and when he came back, you know, I thought, well, I need to try to figure out if he's been kicked out of school or, you know, whatever. So we meet with the principal, and the first words out of this man's mouth were, "Josh, are you a Christian?"
Oh, gosh.
Now, at this point, I'm still attending church. I'm involved in church. But that question just instantly angered me.
What's that have to do with anything?
Well, exactly. And I got it that because of who he was, that was everything about it.
Right.
But for us, and, you know, my son was a self-proclaimed atheist, and I was fine with that. I taught them to think for themselves, you know, but that part of me that always wants to put that best foot forward and is very passive, I said nothing, you know, and there were times I thought, why didn't I say something? But that has been an issue for me.
Yeah, that's a good question. What is going on? I mean, we'd have to just think.
Well,
about
God would be disappointed in him
Yeah.
as we were.
Yeah.
Well,
somebody says
for
that,
those
yeah.
types of people, you get your morality from God. Like there's no good in you. And so the fact that he's there in the principal's office, he's there probably for some behavioral issue. And so this guy goes right to, you need God in order to be a better behavior. It's that good without God thing that you wrote. It's what they don't get. They don't get that you can be...
You can be kind and loving.
You can have strong moral compass without God or the Bible guiding you.
Wow.
Well, let's get back to your spiritual journey, because I was raised Presbyterian, and I know part of your stepping stones was in the Presbyterian church.
So is that what happened from Catholic to Presbyterian? Or?
No, I actually went from Catholicism I was attending a Catholic church, and after my parents moved to Nashville, and I stayed in East Tennessee, and I don't know why, but one morning I woke up and decided I wanted to really belong to this church thing. And so I started attending church on a fairly regular basis.
Catholic church.
Catholic church, the same one I was confirmed in. But I never really knew anybody there. I mean, it's like you'd think I've been going to this church for several years and I don't know anybody. Again, very much like my school pattern. And then one day I was just fed up with it. I was like, you know, I'm just not getting anything out of this. So I left. And then after, you know, a few months went by, I thought, yeah, nobody's called to check on me. Nobody even knew I was there. You know, why bother? But the other thing, and this goes back to, I guess, my middle school years, having had a lot of anxiety, the church that I was going to moved to face-to-face confession. That nearly did me in. I can remember sobbing because I had to go sit face to face and confess my sins to this guy.
Rather than in a confessional,
right?
With the
screen.
And
And I took confession very seriously, So I went in and I spilled my guts, And in a way, I think now I look back, I think maybe it was a little cathartic for me because I had no one to talk to. But when it was face to face, I felt so exposed and I felt so vulnerable. And I mean, I would have complete just meltdowns. And then I would sit in the pew afterwards doing my, penance and just feeling horrible about myself. And I mean, at that age, I hadn't done anything, but I just felt terrible.
How old were you?
Oh, probably, 11, 12-ish.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, having a lot of guilt and shame.
Wow.
So after Catholicism, what'd you go?
I went from not doing anything to I had a real major, I don't know what the word is, a soiree into alcohol again. I'd started drinking at a really young age. And so
you're like 11, 12, 13 in there?
I was actually drinking, or really starting to get a taste for it when I was around 12. My parents were giving it to me, though,
What was it, beer?
Whoa.
Mixed drinks. They were making screwdrivers in the blender, and my mom would give me one and say, "Don't tell your stepdad." And then I would drink that one, and my stepdad would give me one and say, "Don't tell your mom." So I was getting double what they thought I was drinking, So I went from this being in this mode of heavy drinking. I've only ever done cocaine one time, but it was during this, and I really went way overboard, and it was to get back at my husband at the time. They were doing cocaine in my living room, and I kept telling them to stop, and they wouldn't. So I just went ahead and, well, fine, I'll show you. And so the next day, at the time, I didn't have a car that was running, and so a girl that I worked with came to pick me up. I was a hairdresser at the time, and I'll never forget the look on her face scared me. She said, "What have you been doing?" And I was like, "Just go to work, make up a story. There's no way I can come to work today." So that immediately sent me on a religious fanatical journey because I was miserable. I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know about AA back then. And so there was a Bible thumper that I worked with, and they talked about her behind her back. And even then I had compassion for her because I thought they shouldn't hate her. This is all this is all she knows.
Yeah.
So I reached out to her because I had gone to my boss at the time, who I loved. She was very hip, and her daughter worked with her, and I went to her crying one day, and I said, "I think I need help." And I didn't know that I wasn't asking the right person. I certainly knew I couldn't ask family, And she's like, "Well, honey, what's wrong?" And we pulled the door shut, and I told her I drink too much. I drink till I black out. I wake up and I don't know where I am, and I don't know what to do. And she was like, "Oh, honey, you're young. That's what people do." And at the time, that really angered me because I was reaching out for help and I wasn't getting it. I didn't know back then. She didn't know how to help me.
No.
And she didn't know any better.
Clearly.
Yeah. Well, I went to a teacher when I was in, I think it was fifth grade. And I went to her. She came to me and said, "What's wrong? I notice you're always, kind of sad. What's wrong?" I said, "Yeah, my parents drink all the time. They fight, and nothing was done then." And at the time, I was angry because I had opened myself up.
Yeah,
And I was
sure.
like, oh. So anyway, I had this history of reaching out to people and nobody being there, So I decided I'm going to reach out for religion one more time. So I reached out. I went to this woman. She took me to a church that was non-denominational, but for all practical purposes, it was Baptist.
Yeah.
And immediately I found love. I found people that wanted to give me some direction. I didn't drink at all for several years. I became completely engrossed in Bible study, and I had relief from the chaos,
Yeah, structure.
And so, it fed a need, So it's like I try even now not to fault people for where they are because it's like they're getting what they need, obviously. Yeah. So
it had a stabilizing effect.
Yeah,
and
a comforting effect.
Unlike the Catholic Church, I'm sure that the non-denominational Protestant evangelical churches are pretty good at promoting and building community.
Yeah, they are. They absolutely family. To me, it was my family
and
for a while.
Whether they have covered dish dinners or if they have small group Bible studies that meet in somebody's house. Or,
yep.
Yeah.
And I did all of that.
Yeah.
We went we used to go after Sunday service.
Out
We'd
to
have
lunch.
we'd have Sunday morning service, and then we had Sunday evening service
Yeah.
and Wednesday night service. And
Yeah.
I was there. If the door was open, I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And after Sunday night service, they knew that families with kids, I went to a huge church, and this was even in a small town. It was huge.
Mm-hmm.
So after the Sunday night service, you would bring loaves of bread and sandwich meat, and they would do a light dinner so that families with kids could go home and not have to worry about cooking and all of that. When my kids were growing up during that time, they called it Eatin' Church. So we would go to Eatin' Church, and it was sweet, it was.
Yeah.
But even then, I can remember thinking, these people really believe this stuff? And I never voiced that to anybody, but I would think it. Oh, God, that's kind of strange. And my parents, actually, when I was going through my confirmation class, they were taking a class called Inquiry Class. And I was very shocked that in this small town, they were teaching the Bible as metaphor.
Yeah.
And I was
Wow.
like, that was really progressive. I was like, wow. So my mom would come home and share some of the stuff they learned in class, and I would find it really interesting. Mm-hmm. So I went from this non-denominational church. We moved. Then my husband and I decided to complete repeat the pattern. He was an alcoholic. I ended up, ashamed to say, cheating on him. But when that all came to a head, we decided we would move here. Now, we didn't say out loud we're moving to try to rescue our marriage. We just all of a sudden had this wonderful idea that we should move away,
New beginning, though.
Yeah. And
Like
ultimately,
Dad used to do.
And ultimately, that marriage fell apart. And of course, this is a whole nother podcast. But he was gay, and I used to tell people, they would say, "Well, when did you figure it out?" We had 3 kids together. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can now say, I didn't for many, many years. I can now say I knew it from the beginning. Like I didn't suspect it. There was no doubt. I knew it.
And yet you were attracted to him in some way. So.
I was. And that self-loathing part of me, after many, many years of treatment, I realized it was filling the need for me to prove to myself that I was unlovable. We managed to have 3 kids together, but that was by sheer determination on my part.
Well, this is fascinating because, and I don't know, I really would like to look under the hood of that phenomenon, that you don't like yourself. You have your own voice in your head that I'm a fraud or whatever, like most of us have, but it was a self-loathing. I'm not worthy of love.
Right.
And so I put myself in a relationship that confirms that.
Yes.
Wow.
Now that's, that took me years to get to.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those situations. Is that the truth or not? I don't know.
Right.
That's what I put together. And it makes sense to me because it answered a lot of questions.
So you've had a lot of therapy.
I've had on and off therapy, yes, for many, many years. And I also gravitate, like I am a self-help junkie. Just,
You read a lot of self-help and watch
I
YouTubes.
read a lot, and I do, yeah. And I also have helped a lot of other people in those situations.
Yeah, because you're a life coach.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and I'm certain that it's like a lot of other fields. I fell in love with that because it helped me so much.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, you got a lot of life to draw upon.
Yeah, and I got heavily involved in a personal growth group, which helped me undo a lot of that. Yeah. Became a coordinator and all this other stuff. So I went from doing this non-denominational thing, and when we moved here, I immediately started looking for a church. By then, I had loosened up a little bit, though. I had started drinking again, but I was not. I was doing controlled drinking, and I was doing okay with it. And then I church hopped, trying to find the right church, and so I would go to a church for a while, and then I would become the child care person or the person in charge of this or charge of that. And then I would get burnt out and I would go somewhere else. And then I would end up being the this or the that, and I would get burnt out. So the conclusion I started to come to was these people love me because I'm doing a lot for them, And when I leave, that's the end of it. It's like a relationship. We broke up. They go their separate way. They never call me to check on me. And I was really starting to see I'm filling a void for them and I'm not getting anything for me. I would get it initially because the excitement of something new,
Sure.
So you're the type of person that gets busy. You find a role. You're not just going to be a pew warmer.
Because I don't know how to be a friend. I don't know how to be a participant.
Well, how much of it is, I I need to be liked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some of that, and some of, if I'm in charge, I can keep my distance. So it fed a couple of things. Yeah. Wow. So I went, like to a Church of God. I tried Church of Christ. I did Methodist, just cherry picking here and there and trying different things.
Now, in your personal life in the meantime, like from the evangelical or from the non-denom to all these various churches that you're visiting and being involved in, what's going on personally with you and God? Like, do you have a prayer life? I
do.
Yeah.
And what I knew early on was that prayer wasn't doing anything outside of me. Prayer was doing something internally. And I have a heavy meditation practice now. I'm very into that kind of thing.
They used to say that prayer is not for God, it's for you.
And I believe that. And I believe that. But I don't believe, obviously, I don't believe that it's God or the Holy Spirit doing anything to me. I believe I'm turning inward.
Yeah.
And I'm being with me.
Yeah.
And I'm loving who I am.
Yeah.
In all my flaw.
Are you familiar with Sam Harris's work?
No, but I've heard you mention his name several times.
Well, he's got a book called Waking Up, and of all the voices in the atheist movement, which are staunch atheist and anti-theist, like they're anti-religion. They're the more firebrand, However, Sam is set apart a little bit in that context, where he acknowledges the power of meditation and mindfulness and contemplation and solitude and silence.
Yeah, that sounds right up my alley.
Right, and now, like even now, Christians love to say, science has shown that prayer works, and what they're discovering is kind of like what you're saying, that if somebody takes a time where they just move out of the rat race for a little bit, they
sitting silent,
solitude, and
think,
introspective,
right,
and
reflect,
then that's going to make your life better.
Yeah,
but
intercessionary prayer, the stuff that Catholics believe,
right,
and others, I don't think so. No. Oh, God, give me a parking spot, that kind of shit.
Well, yeah, or either heal my
or heal my son
friend
or whatever it is. I got a question for Mary though. So you go Catholic, you go to Catholic church. When you're there, you go, nothing. I feel nothing. It's not working. You go to evangelical church. And you look around and go, okay, people are nice, but how is this possible? The stuff that they believe. You go, to the next church, and it's like they use you and then they spit you out. Why do you keep going back to church?
I think
it's like to hell with them,
Well, I do think it was that, like I said, because I had never really learned how to become a friend with someone, to be intimate with someone, and I was on the I can walk into a situation and immediately just start talking to people,
Yeah.
But I don't let people in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I think what I kept looking for was to belong to something, and I didn't know where else to find it. Now that I'm older, I know lots of different places I can find it. But then I don't know how else to find this.
Right.
I just kept looking.
I get that.
I think, there's a degree in which, especially if you have a lot of self-doubt and self-loathing, or at least it's very common for all of us to say, I'm judgmental because I'm judgmental. I mean, like I'm judgmental of the outside world because I'm judgmental on the inside. Hurt people.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a degree in which you're on autopilot. Like you're just almost like bumping into a wall. Like the reason you're describing all these times where she just keeps subjecting herself to
but it has nothing to do with intellectual quality.
No,
it's something
it's
else.
Just bumping into a wall. You're just a robot. And then until somehow you come into some enlightenment, some self-awareness, and you find yourself bumping into that wall and asking yourself, why am I bumping into this wall? And that's when life begins, or at least maturity and adulthood.
Absolutely. And I think it happened for me when I hit the Presbyterian church. I actually, after my hairdressing years were over, and that's another long story.
You got a bunch of them.
I went into, I decided I was going to go back to school, and I went into education. Not what I wanted to do, but it made sense. I took the test. It said, these were all the qualities. Okay, I'll do it. And I loved kids, and I had kids, so it made sense. So I went to King College in Bristol. It was a private Presbyterian school. I was so proud of myself that I got in because my brother was way smarter than me, like naturally smart. And he got in and got a full ride.
Wow.
I got in on a half tuition scholarship, and I was floored. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So I start my thing, and I'm really enjoying it. I found out then I hated school, and I hated school because of all the isolation.
Yeah.
I loved college, loved it. And I was, 20 something. I already had 2 kids by this time.
Wait, how old were you when you had 2 kids?
I was 20. My first child I had when I was like 24.
Okay, that's not
So yeah, and the second one, 25-ish. So I was in my mid 20s when I started college.
education?
Yes.
That's where you went. You were going to be a teacher.
Yeah, I became a teacher.
You became a teacher.
Yeah.
My gosh, you have like 6 lives here. It's amazing.
You got a bachelor's in education?
Yes.
Okay.
Bachelor's in interdisciplinary studies.
Was that the kind of thing
education.
where you really were like, I can do this? Like, obviously you felt inferior to your brother. You felt inferior to everybody.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I did.
I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. And no matter what, I mean, I was, straight A student in high school, and that wasn't good enough. And so, so I go to this school, and I find that I'm really good at it.
Yeah.
I'm good at school, but chapel was a requirement.
Okay.
And I found that I loved chapel. But I loved chapel not for the camaraderie. I loved chapel because these are the first religious people that I've heard that think.
Yeah. How is that possible?
So several years later, after I've done all this church hopping and I just haven't found what I was looking for, we lived across the street from a Presbyterian church. And we would drive past there, and I think, I want to go there. I want to go try that place out. So finally I said to this is by this time my second husband, which was a whole... I went from the first marriage to being married to a man who couldn't keep his hands off me. And I think maybe later on, lots of other women. And he was allergic to work. So I was and in my first marriage, I was not really the sole provider, but I definitely made more money, and I was more ambitious. Second marriage, most of the time I made all the money or most of the money.
Yeah.
And
where'd you meet him, the second one?
I met him, my brother was his stepson's music teacher.
Oh, okay.
So we met through our children, basically. And so anyway, so
Was this after King's College or before?
Yes, after King College. My kids were 2 and 3, and we moved here, and we started going to the Presbyterian church after I had my third child. So that would have been maybe 5 years later.
So you had a good experience with Presbyterianism at the King's College. You moved to Murfreesboro. You're right across the street from when you said, I'm going to go over here.
Right.
And I am curious, though. I mean, there is a place where you keep, being attracted to people that are going to, like you said, prove to me that I'm unlovable still.
Yeah. And I actually, with this first Presbyterian church, I found what I had been looking for in a multifaceted way.
Which is what?
I found that I could think for myself.
Okay. I
found people that loved me.
Just as you are.
Just like I was. I didn't even still recognize that fully until recently. And, I could get my emotional part of me fed. I could get the intellectual part of me fed. And at times I even had my needs, my literal needs met. We had a situation where we needed some money, and they wrote me a check for $600,
Wow.
And I became the Christian ed director there and all that. And I mean, so it was like I had the full package here.
I don't hear theology, though. Was there some
what happened was I became an elder. And eventually, the Christian ed director, and the pastor at the time was very outside the box. I mean, very flamboyant, lots of makeup, purple fingernails. Loved this woman. And the people there loved her. And it was very interesting because you had a very conservative end of the church and a very liberal end of the church, and they loved each other. And it was totally fine with all of them.
Wow, that is rare.
And it's still that way. It's still that way. In fact, I just recently started going back over there for some things. So...
That's here in Murfreesboro.
It's actually in Nashville.
Okay.
Southminster Presbyterian on Harding. And my kids went to Scouts there. It really, one of my kids went to the daycare there. But what happened was we started an adult class. And I was talking to the pastor, and we found this curriculum called Living the Questions. And this was a game changer for me. It literally went into... why we believe what we believe. Do we believe it at all? What do we do with that? That I was introduced to Marcus Borg there, John Shelby Spong.
Great.
And for the first time in my life, I was able to say, I don't believe this, I do believe that. It's like, I do believe that Jesus existed. Mm-hmm. I think he was a pretty swell guy,
But then public relations got out of hand.
Well, I think it was, and I remember saying to somebody when I was testing the waters after I'd been there a while, a friend of mine asked me about my religion, and I said, well, you know how we live in Nashville and we have the Titans football team, and you would say of yourself, oh yeah, I'm a Titan. Well, that doesn't mean you actually play on the team. It just means you're rooting for them. Yeah. I said, that's the kind of Christian I think I am. I'm like, I don't believe he was God, but yeah, go Jesus. Mm-hmm. He did some cool stuff.
Doobie Brothers. Jesus is just all right with me.
Exactly. Yeah. And I could say that, and lightning didn't strike, and they didn't throw me out of the church, and it felt really good. And I heard people in these classes that we then started holding, I heard women who were in their 70s and been in this church all their lives saying, yeah, so I really don't believe that, so what do I do with that? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow, these people are awesome,
Yeah.
And so I think that was where I didn't have anything all that tight to unravel. Mm-hmm. But I think that is where, if it started to unravel, that's where it started.
It sounds like you were like, this is a safe place for me to be myself.
Yeah, and
maybe,
doubt.
Because and doubt. And wherever you went, whether it's bouncing from school to school and all this stuff, there's a degree in which you were a guarded personality, not letting people in. And maybe this was the first time it felt safe to do that.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I mean, I could actually let the wall down. And so I remember
going... And not be rejected.
Right. And I remember going to my pastor one day, and I wasn't going to her for this particular reason, but it came up in conversation. I said to her, my son asked me, my oldest one, he asked me one day, he said, Mama, and we were churchgoers, he says, Mama, how do we know we're right? I said, and the first words out of my mouth were, we don't.
There you go.
We don't know. And so I went to her, and I'm thinking, this is the first spiritual leader that I felt like was my spiritual leader. I said, and that's what I told him. And she said, I think you're doing exactly the right thing. That's exactly what you should do. And I was like, wow. So it's just like my mind just kept getting blown over and over. And I can remember feeling like I can sit here and do a Sunday school lesson with kids and not feel bad about it. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I told these kids this. I had an incident when my kids were, I told you I went to Church of Christ briefly. A group of people asked me if they could come to my house and talk to my kids.
From the church.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe they're going to try to get them hyped up about youth program or whatever. Okay, sure. They come, they pop in a video, a little film strip, and I was really passive. They proceed to show my kids this film strip about how they're going to burn in hell. Oh, and I look back on that now, and I'm thinking, I would never let that happen now. Mm-hmm. Right. Even though, there was a part of me that wanted to try this. I was like, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what am I? So as soon as they left, I tell my kids, erase all that, pretend you didn't see that. I said, they think they're doing the right thing. Just please don't, And I felt terrible that I exposed them to that. Wow.
Have they ever said anything about it being traumatic? Or?
No, we've talked about it, and they've never said it was traumatic. I think maybe by then, or maybe the fact that I'd always been kind of allowed them to be free thinkers, they probably, even at a young age, they probably just didn't.
Well, even the fact that you swooped in right after and said erase that. I mean, that gave them permission to go, oh, that's just not true.
Yeah.
If a child believes it's true, it's very traumatic.
Yeah, it is. And so I think that's one of the reasons things weren't too difficult for me, was because my parents always were kind of, think for yourself. And
So when you contacted me, you mentioned a couple of people, and I looked them up because I didn't know who they were, and I forget their names now, but they were the ones that mentioned my show or whatever, our show.
Oh yeah. Benny Copeland, who has he has a podcast on dogs. And the conversation started because, again, I'm a junkie, and we had a personal growth group together. He started the group, but I was a
self-help junkie.
Yeah. We were talking about podcasts because I've, with coaching, which I still, want to do on the side. My big dream is to own a retreat, but that's another story too.
Oh, me too. That would be great.
Yeah. So we were talking about podcasting, and I was so we're like, trying to learn from each other and about different things. And I said, well, tell me about podcasting, because I really want to do that. what have you learned? And he went into great depth about your podcast from the technical side.
Oh, okay.
But then he said, and they've got a great podcast. You should listen. He's an atheist. Several of my friends are. He said, you should listen. And that was part of why I was drawn to that particular group of people. They're, very open about everything.
Yeah.
And it's okay if you're this, and even if you're not, if you're on the other end of the spectrum, it's great. So I listened to your podcast one day.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, it was one of those things where I had never quite approached the door. And I have, of atheism, and I have actually said to people, if you want to talk about atheism in the literal meaning of the word, I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There is still definitely a very spiritual side to me, and I don't even know if you would call it spiritual, because I think what my belief really is science, and I think that whatever it is I'm feeling can be explained in a scientific way.
Yeah.
Yeah, most likely.
I don't necessarily care about that.
Yeah.
I just care that when I meditate, it gets me centered and I feel good. I can do things I didn't, I have a lot of issues with stage fright, singing.
Really? I'd find that hard to believe.
Here's the thing, talking is not an issue for me. I love to talk.
Huh.
Singing is like bearing my soul.
Yeah.
And
naked.
Yes. In fact, you use the word I use very often. I said, I feel like I'm standing on stage with my clothes off. And that's been a journey that has been kind of, the alcoholism, the stage fright and anxiety, the religion, they're all kind of intertwined into this exposing myself, being okay with who I am.
Yeah. So I love the science. I think what I've said before, and this has recently evolved. I used to say that art is my God. Art's my religion, because it's just expression, and it's allows for flaws. In fact, it comes from darkness, like a lot of the blues or dark poetry or dirges or eulogies or just human expression, and then elation and joy and celebration. And then I thought, well, science is also my religion. And I know it's strange because you get all these the College of Arts and Sciences,
Yeah, right.
And those two things are almost like Apollos and Dionysius, and their synthesis of like the brain side and the facts and the math. And then art says fuck math and fuck facts, and I'm going to just do an abstract painting here, and it doesn't have to make sense. You don't have to like it or whatever. There's this freedom with art. And then there's this structure with science, and I don't know. Yeah, I just think those are my religions.
Yeah, and I feel the same exact way. And I think as you were talking about it, I feel very balanced in that.
Yeah,
I feel like it is. I'm right down the middle.
Yeah,
I don't lean heavily toward either one. I'm very balanced.
But isn't that interesting how people do though? There is that they want black and white rather than the middle ground, which Aristotle or one of those old guys said, I think it was Aristotle, that's the middle way is the way. Moderation, right. Don't get too crazy on either side. And by the way, that's the kind of stuff news loves. The television news and
the
stuff.
Extreme polls.
The extremes, always the extremes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a what do you call it? A flavor wheel of how people look at abortion and what have you, and yet you get the crazies on the left and the crazies on the right, and that's the argument all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways of looking at it, and yet we don't see those ways because there's not enough conflict there, and conflict is story, and news is story. So. Anyway, sorry to get off.
No. I agree with you completely. In fact, I've had that thought in my head a lot when I hear something that sounds really polarized. And I get frustrated, and then I'll finally hear somebody say something else, and I'm like, oh, because I need balance mentally.
Yeah.
I need it. You were talking about music. When I was going to this personal growth thing, I finally came through this place where I can no longer not do music because of my fear. I have to do it because it feeds me. That is my spiritual fodder.
Expression.
And so I finally got up the guts, and I got on Craigslist, and I found a woman who wanted someone to sing, the lead. She wanted to play guitar and do the harmony, and I'm like, oh my God, this is perfect, So I called her up, we met. Within a couple of months, we were doing open mic at the Bluebird.
Wow.
Now, that I went from being terrified to sing in the car in front of somebody to singing at the Bluebird. But here's what happened. I had to squelch the joy here because I did the song and I was singing and I forgot the words. And thank God she was great. I looked at her like, oh crap. And she mouthed the next word to me. and we went through with it. We finished it. And the audience was great. I'd heard that the bluebird is tough and all that. They were so sweet. Mm-hmm. And I turned around to walk off the stage because in the moment my head was just full of what's going on. But the minute it was over and I'm stepping down off the stage, I was like, oh my God, I realized I'm not afraid of singing. I'm afraid of making a mistake. Mm-hmm. And I made a mistake and I survived.
Yeah. And probably now most people didn't even know it.
Well, yeah. Well, maybe. And a friend of mine and I now, we leading a coffee house over at the Center for Spiritual Living, Nashville. Mm-hmm. And I sing every month now. And like I said, I had my first paid gig. I went back to Southminster and did a song there, and they paid me. And I was floored. I was like, wow, you paid me to do this? I would do this for nothing. And
well, if you got a chance to sing at the Bluebird,
that's great.
You're good.
Well, I mean, it was open mic. Pretty much anybody can sing there. But I was so freaked out about it. I kept trying to find someone to work with people that have stage fright. And I just couldn't find the person that resonated with me. So I found somebody in Canada. And I drove to Canada. I got my passport and everything just to go work with a guy. And I said, I'm so terrified. But obviously he does weekly classes. I said, obviously I can't come every week from where I am. Mm-hmm. And he says, well, I'll tell you what. You come up here. You spend a couple of days. We'll cram all those lessons into a couple of days. And then we'll let you sing in the showcase. And I'm like, okay. So I'm terrified and I'm excited. But I went and I did it, and it was great. And I didn't fully overcome the fear until I discovered hypnosis.
What?
Which, again, I think ties into the spirituality because it's a lot like meditation, you know.
Suggestibility.
Yeah,
kind of things.
So I learned about hypnosis through a class I was taking over at CSLN, and one of the ministers there asked for volunteers, and I'm always the first one, me, pick me. So we did it, and I had been in an accident a few years ago, and I had this chronic neck pain and stuff, and so he asked for volunteers. I get up there, he hypnotized me, and he said, don't have anything I'm going to really do with you. I just want to show people what an induction looks like. So we did it. After the class was over, somebody walked up to me and said, so what was it like, And I said, it's funny. I feel very light. Everything seems brighter. I just feel good, nothing magical. I just feel really good. So I get in the car, I'm going to drive home, and I went to do a shoulder check. And when I did, I had full mobility and no pain. And I was like,
praise Jesus.
Well, the scientist in me, my first thought was, I wonder how long this will last. And I immediately looked at the clock. 4 hours, no pain. And I'm like, wow, there's something to this.
The hypnosis.
Yeah. So I started looking up hypnosis and found out that it's related to religious science. That's probably me.
Yeah.
That it had some of the same people involved that were in religious science and all that. So I started to kind of study it. Mm-hmm. Now I use it on a regular basis. And I found accidentally, I was using it to go to sleep at night. I got up on stage one day and I had no fear at all. And that was the only thing that was different. So my daughter came to hear me sing somewhere, and she went, oh my God, Mama, what have you done? I said, what do you mean? She said, you have so much confidence. I said, it's hypnosis. So I've been using it for my anxiety and for a lot of other
hypnotize
things.
yourself?
You talk to yourself?
I just listen to their tracks that you listen to, and they put you through the induction.
How do you get out? I don't know. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's like you really don't have to get out. It's kind of like meditation. Mm-hmm. When you meditate, you don't do anything. I mean, some people will, rub the sides of your chair or whatever. What I do is I go to sleep. Mm-hmm. And then when I wake up, I just, go about my day and all that. Now, I do use it during the day. Sometimes I'll use it if I have a headache. Because I don't like to take medicine if I don't have to.
That's fascinating.
What is the name of that app that you were talking about?
I use one called Omvana.
Well, we were talking about Headspace. As far as a guided meditation. But this is different.
I'm familiar with Headspace too.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's been part of my personal growth journey is the meditation stuff because prayer didn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, in reflecting on coming here, I've never worshipped anything, ever.
That's interesting.
No matter what church I went to, I would go through the steps, but I never worshipped anything. I just didn't feel the need. And I remember when I was married to my first husband was raised in church, but he never really, but he would call himself a believer. My second husband was raised in church, very much Bible thumping family, and all dirt under the rugs everywhere.
Yeah.
You know. But I remember him saying to me something one time about being saved, which I technically was, and been baptized, you know, in the non-denominational church. But I remember saying to him when I was starting to get some nerve about me, saved from what? I don't think we need saving, you know.
Well, essentially saved from death.
Right.
But
saved from judgment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I never believed in hell, never believed in heaven, but, you know, for many, many years couldn't say that, you know.
Yeah.
But now here I am in this Presbyterian church, and I can actually say,
right.
I don't believe there's a heaven, I don't believe there's a hell.
But you're out of the, are you still with Presbyterian?
No, I actually, because of that, even though they were very open, I thought I need to move on to the next thing. So I started kind of toying with Buddhism. That really didn't do it for me. I learned a lot from that, and but like I didn't enjoy chanting, and you know, and I still have lots of Buddhist friends, but there were a lot of things I got from that. You know, the being in the moment, that kind of thing.
Sure.
They talk a lot about suffering, and what I have found is that for me to talk a lot about it, it makes it harder for me to walk away from it. So it just didn't serve me well.
All right. So now
I got
religious
involved.
science?
Well, I got involved in religious science principles, but I wasn't attending there yet. It was kind of interesting. My mother started getting interested in religion. My family was not participatory at all. And all of a sudden, my sister and my mother are going to church together, and my brother, who had been a staunch Catholic, was going to church with them at the gathering. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a Christian, but it's, you know, they held the services in a movie theater, and they had a band, you know.
Yeah, I've seen a sign. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
All
so
right.
I enjoyed it. And the pastor there at the time he was still very fundamental, but he was kind of this is the church for people who don't like church. So it was tolerable for me. And I went because my family was going. It's like this first time we've ever all gone to church together. And then that pastor died, and things just kind of, you know, didn't work out. And I ended up finally doing what I wanted to do, which was going to the religious science church. When I found religious science, it made sense to me because it talks about the fact that if you look at things at the atomic level, everything is connected. Now, I was using the word God because that was what people understood. But to me, it was literally a scientific fact that we're all connected. You know,
Everything is holy now.
Yeah.
Like the sacredness of, and pantheism, almost panentheism, where everything, God is in everything, and everything is in God.
Yeah.
I mean,
You can say that. Sure.
Right. And that is what I believe now. And it's not, like I said, it's not magic. It's science.
Well, I think it goes back to when the chaos of your young life, you know, the alcoholism and the abuse, and then that first thing, I think one of your best experiences with religion was it was like structure and stability, and it's like a safe space. I mean, the funny thing about religions and man-made stuff is that as opposed to it being something just simple and pure and almost inherently true, you know, without the force of men trying to make it make sense or whatever. It's already there, leave it alone, and so you bump into like religions that are like adding a whole lot of stuff like salvation or heaven and hell and all these things. You were like, no. And yet and so I'm just saying it sounds like that your journey is, you know, you find this wonderful thing, and then it gets clouded up with doctrine and judgment, and you're like throwing it off, and then but there's something here that you want in your life that will keep, that at least somehow provides that big picture, you know, that I fit in here somewhere. And I don't know.
Well, even in the last couple of months, I've continued this journey, and I've even walked away from that. I was studying to become a practitioner, and at some point,
practitioner of religious science.
Well, and actually, I was actually going to get it in divine science, which is related.
Okay.
So if you have, you know, Christianity, and you have all these sects under it. If you have New Thought, you have religious science, you have divine science, you have unity.
Oh,
And-
okay.
Yeah, and so I was doing that, and I got sick over the holidays, which is usually really good for me if I have some crisis, because it makes me sit down and think. And I started thinking about it and thinking, not everybody believes the same thing here. And a lot of what they teach is not what people believe when they come here. So why? Why would I do this?
There's a lot of woo-woo in unity, too. I mean, it's...
Well, and it depends
it's attractive and all, but...
Right, but it depends on where you are in it. Because
Yeah.
I think religious science is probably the least woo-woo. And divine science says they're not Christian in some areas, and then in other areas they'll say they are. And unity is the most Christian of the three.
Yeah, right.
And it's like I still couldn't swallow that. It's like, I just, can't do that.
I think unity served me as a stage in my life. Like I
Stepping
became
stone.
the song leader there, and the one here in Murfreesboro. Did
Right.
you ever visit it by chance?
Not that one. I've been to the Unity of Music City now,
Yeah.
and then the one on Franklin Road.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I even then I was like, this is too Christian for me, And it's funny because my kids, even at a young age, they would make some pretty sacrilegious jokes, and I would be like, that's really funny. Don't say that out in front of people. My daughter has a shirt. Even now, she's so cute. She's very sweet. She's got this infectious smile. And, but tattoos everywhere and the gauged ears. And she's got this shirt that says Hail Satan on it. And, and it's just to be funny.
Sure.
it's a big one.
But
How old is she?
she's 27.
She's here in Murfreesboro, or
She's in
Smyrna?
Franklin.
Franklin.
Yeah, she has a hair salon there.
Oh,
and
great.
and then I have a 21-year-old who's still trying to figure out what he wants to be when he grows up. And I'm like, honey, I'm 52 and I'm still trying to figure it
me too.
out.
Me
Does he live with you?
No, he did for a while, and he now lives with a couple of his friends. It's interesting. He's living with one of the kids that he grew up with in the Presbyterian church.
Okay.
So that was kind of interesting.
I have a 20-year-old, and he's kind of lost, as far as
Yeah.
like, what do we do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a 24-year-old that just graduated from college, and that limbo between college, like the bubble of college, and then the real world, it's daunting, especially with
It's tough.
jobs being what they are.
Yeah, my 21-year-old is going through this space of, he didn't go to college. He chose not to go to college. None of my kids did, interestingly enough. He says to me, I'll take him somewhere, and we'll be hanging out with friends that haven't seen him since he was younger. And they say, so where are you going to school? And we'll get back in the car. And he goes, I'm so sick of that question.
It's almost like where you going to church.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, none of my kids graduated from high school the traditional way, and here I'm
Sure.
a teacher.
I
But they
get
all
that.
struggled with anxiety, and they all struggled with, I don't know. I hated school myself. To think that I went on and became a teacher is crazy.
You teaching now, or
Not really.
No. I actually, I was teaching. I taught for 10 years in Metro, and then I taught
what
for
age?
4th grade.
Okay.
I taught 4th grade for about 8 years, and then I taught ELL,
Yeah.
English language learners, and then I went to teach 7th grade math in Springfield. And my second year there, I was walking to my car and I was hit by a school bus.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah,
My
so
God.
that put me out of work for 2 years.
You think?
And the day that I told my third husband, who I had no children with, that I was cleared to go back to work, he asked me for a divorce. I suck
So
at
are
the
you
marriage
married?
thing.
Are you married now, or are you just cool?
No.
You're just free as a bird.
No, I'm free as a bird, and dating sucks. I
know.
hate it.
Yeah.
I would never want to go
What?
back to that.
What did you break bones what happened?
Oh, I broke, my pelvis was broken in 3
Jesus
places.
Christ.
I broke my left hip, 9 ribs, C7 in my neck, finger, knee. I had to have a finger surgery because I kept telling them my finger was broken and they kept saying it wasn't. And 2 months later, when it's still, like this, they found out that the first bone was actually slightly under the second bone, and it was ugly. So they
My
had to,
gosh.
yeah, and the treatment in the
Fucking
hospital.
Evil Knievel here. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
How long were you in the
wow.
hospital?
I was in the hospital 4 days. And when I told people that, they were outraged because they said I probably should have been there a couple weeks.
Yeah.
In fact, they initially told me I would be there for a week and then they'd send me to rehab. But workers' comp is not, real conducive to getting good treatment. So I was in there 4 days. They didn't so much as wipe my face while I was there. My husband at the time he was a jerk, but he had to roll the windows down on the way home. It was, in November because I smelled so bad.
Oh.
I mean, they literally did not. I had to call my daughter and ask her to come up and brush my hair. I had, long hair like I do now. It was longer even. And where I was on the backboard, My hair
sure.
was all tangled. It was a mess.
So your story
My gosh.
is not our typical guest. I mean,
You think? Yeah. How
most
true.
of them have had a traumatic experience losing their faith or cutting it out of their bones with knives and,
I just kind of walked out.
Yeah, and like you
Gradually.
said, you never worshipped anything.
Right.
And I think it's interesting because I've never thought of it this way, but when a person does almost cede, C-E-D-E, their agency or their personhood, they give it up and they say, fill me.
Yeah, God.
And so you're an empty vessel, and Paul made all these metaphors of being the temple of the Holy Spirit. And so in a way, you're kind of a vacuum of selfness in the forfeiture to this higher being. And so that when you do, realize that it's not just like, we had a show yesterday. We taped a show with Roe, and he said, some people say that it's like, when losing your faith is like finding out that Santa Claus doesn't exist. He said, no. It's like finding out your mother doesn't exist.
Yeah. Right.
That she was always a figment of your imagination.
Yeah, and see, I
that's
always
pretty-
suspected she probably wasn't.
But I'm just saying,
But that's how powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
how people
so
get into
what happens is we have this God-shaped hole and we fill it with God. Well, it sounds like, you never had that devotion to something. You were wanting to extract things like, going to First Cafeteria and say, I'll have some mashed potatoes, I'll have some of this. Even when you visited Buddhism, it was like, I'll take this, but y'all can keep that. And you've done that your whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it is good. And I do love, I did have a great experience. My first religion, what I was raised in, was Presbyterian. Mm-hmm. And I'll be damned if I don't regret that, ever leaving that. In that I went to the Baptists who emphasized heaven and hell and getting people saved, and that was it. That set me on a mission for the
Much
next
clearer way, though.
Yeah, for the next 25 years.
Yeah.
And when I think about those Presbyterians who are very wishy-washy about this stuff, it's just a metaphor. Mm-hmm. I'm just so I'm just saying I love what you've where you've landed and the things that you've kept and the things you've rejected. I mean, I think you've navigated it well.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, the only time that I ever felt even vaguely like a traumatic type experience was, I mentioned earlier, I read Borg and Spong.
Right.
And when I read Why Christianity Must Die or Change,
Ooh, great.
it was one of those things where it wasn't like it was taking anything away from me, but it was telling me, okay, you're a grown up now. You've got to put that away.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And for about 2 months, I was in a funk.
Okay.
And because I kept thinking, the rug has been pulled out from under me, even though I didn't buy it all. I couldn't just pretend anymore. Mm-hmm. So I had this. I literally had this like physical sensation that the rug had been pulled out from under me. And then I started reading Pema Chodron, the Buddhist nun. And all of a sudden, one day, I just had this thought, you know what? I have had this feeling that I'm falling, and I'm not falling, I'm floating. And it's okay. Let the arms out and just let it go. And so now that's kind of how I, see it, hear it, feel it. And I still, I deal with people in business all the time who are staunch, Christians, and I'm let them be a Christian. I'm not interested in converting them, so let them be. And if they say, I'll be praying for you, I'm like, thank you, and I'll have people say, if it's somebody that I want to reach out to and they're going through a horrible situation and they'll say, please pray for me, I'll tell them, I'll be praying for you. I'm not technically praying for them. When I'm doing meditation, I'm holding that my thoughts of them in that. Mm-hmm. I hope they're okay.
Sure.
If there's, maybe something I can do for them will come to me.
Yeah.
That's as far as it goes. And to me, that's enough.
Yeah, well, it's all there is.
Yeah.
If anything, we talk about the nonsense of thoughts and prayers, but if in the process of thinking of that person, it does dawn on you, I could make them a casserole, and actually do something that that does actually impact their life, as opposed to just saying, "I'll think of you" or "I'll pray for you." I just think that we the joke is that this truck arrives down in Haiti and it says, this and it's on the side of the truck. It says thoughts and
prayers.
It's just big.
Open the truck, nothing's in it.
Yeah.
You know.
It reminds me of my second husband. He told me one time that his sister had called him, and they're very, like I said, the Bible thumpers. And she told him one time, "Yeah, the Lord bought us a truck." And when he got off the phone with her, I said, "You should have told her if the Lord had bought it, it wouldn't have had a payment attached to it."
Yeah,
that's very true. No, I have a friend whose kid just had surgery or something, and she said, "My kid, I hope everything's going to be okay." And of course, on the Facebook page, everybody's prayers, praying hands and stuff. And I said, "Well, just know that he was in the hands of highly trained doctors who are brilliant and are caring and understand and have gone to school, all those kind of things." That's the smart thing is you went to the doctor, and that's why your kid will be fine,
right?
Rather than have faith. Well, not have faith, but know that the chances are better than 50% that he's going to be fine. I mean, I always try to bring it back to the fact that this is the guy that helped you. Come on, So that's just me, though.
I like this term. Did you ever read Brennan Manning? He wrote Ragamuffin Gospel.
No.
He's kind of a progressive Catholic, actually. And anyway, he has this phrase, broken on the wheels of life. And you are. I mean, like of all people that have lived a life where there's just tragedy after tragedy, or at least learning experience after learning experience, painful, lots of pain.
Yeah. From
your childhood to these 3 marriages to, and yet your pursuit, and this is the resilience, man. I love this about human beings. Your pursuit, like no rock left unturned, and you get into hypnotism, and you find stuff, and you're like, okay, you're a survivor, and now here you are. I mean, all these careers too. Like I'm
still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, but what it does is it makes you a very compassionate person, because I mean, you go from like self-hating to self-loving, and everybody's fighting a battle, and you don't have any judgment. You're a very judgment-free person because of your own mistakes also, but you just realize everybody's on a journey. No one's arrived. No one ever will arrive. And what they need more than anything is just encouragement, a pat on the back, a smile. They don't need my judgment.
That is the thing. I was thinking about when you were saying that. My word is love. And it's not a phony baloney, I love you in the Lord. It is, I really love people. And I love broken people. I love people that are a-holes because I realize they're a-holes because they're hurting, just like you said. And, my mother, in the last few years, she decided to get baptized, and she's going to church now, and she's doing all that stuff. And there was a part of me at first that was kind of angry. And I'm like, really, now? And then I thought, you know what? That's her journey. That is her journey. And so she called me one day, and she was bad about saying she's going to do something and not doing it. She had already said she was going to get baptized. They were doing it in a swimming pool, and it was going to be all cool. So she says to me she's going to do this, and then she calls me one day, and she says, I don't know. I think I may just, do this another time. And I said to her, Mom, if you don't do it now, you'll never do it. And she did it, and she tells me all the time she was so happy that she did it. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, well, but I knew that's what she needed. And it's like, that's fine. Let her do it. She's not hurting anybody.
That's really big of you because, in a way, it's a dead end.
Right.
And yet,
yes. That's not my life.
I think she won't get where she needs to get until she goes through that.
Yeah.
It's like if she gets stuck in that always wishing she had done it, she'll never get past it.
So how much do you love the asshole Trump? Since you love assholes.
Again, about compassion. I think... I'm a libertarian, so I don't hate him. I don't love everything he's doing, but in general, I think politicians are politicians, and I think that's I think the thing that I try to do is focus on my little corner of the world, and as long as I'm doing that right, everything else will fall into place. I'm just not going to worry about it. I was talking about love. That really is my thing. And in my house, I have the word love on my kitchen wall. I have it on my bedroom wall, and it's like at the end of the day, and that's why when you mention that, He's a human being just like all the rest of us. And I'm sure that, you know, there are a lot of people that have screwed up as much as he has, or made a lot of bad decisions like he has, or led people in a wrong direction. You know, they're just, we don't see them as much, you know.
Yeah,
and I also, for me, in order for me to stay healthy, I have to not get sucked into hate and judgment and all that. And I just don't.
It can be pretty toxic.
Well, at the end of the day, you know, I was listening to one of the more recent podcasts, and there was somebody talking about being afraid of death. And she said that I've always been acutely aware of my mortality. I'm too have had that. And I remember when I was very young, we had a crucifix that hung on the wall, which I thought was hilarious because we didn't attend church that much. And I would have nightmares about that crucifix. And I would go upstairs to bed, and I would see it, and I would just have this, my heart would race, you know. And I realized I'm not afraid of death. I don't want to die. I mean, and there is a difference. I'm not afraid of it. I don't want to. And I know that ultimately it's going to happen. So my goal is to squeeze every drop of life out of it that I can while I'm here. Yeah. And, you know, for some people, you know, they're happy getting their, you know, 2.5 kids in their picket fence. And that to me would be absolute torture. That would be tough. You know, even now, I mean, I'm out singing, I'm writing. I mean, there's so many things that I'm doing, and I love it. And you know, and that's one of the things I've been out with a couple of jerks lately, and I just think to myself, you know, I really love the life I have right now. Why would I go mess that up? Right. You know? Yeah. And there are times that I'm home alone, and I think, God, it would be nice to have somebody here. You know,
But don't settle.
No, I won't. And I'm just going to keep turning over rocks. That's, you know, in a coaching thing that I went to, we had this afternoon long thing where we talked about all these life issues and life things, and they played music, and you did all these things to kind of get us, you know, the juices flowing. And then the guy said, now I want you to write your life story in 6 words, no more, no less. Exactly 6 words. And mine was, got knocked down, kept getting up. Yep. And that's it.
That's absolutely true.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Well, you feel good about our talk?
I love it.
Yeah, it was great.
I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Absolutely. Great having you. Mary Dunn, don't you know? Right over there. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Mary Dunn.
The Multiple Lives of Mary Dunn.
Really crazy.
Yeah.
Over and over, like career changes, husband changes. I still don't think I have clear in my head how many kids she has.
2 or 3, yeah, I don't know. Wow. I mean, all you do is just sit here and think, how are you still alive? I mean,
what were those 6 words again?
Oh, got knocked down, got up again, or something like that?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, yeah.
And so true.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting how she sort of, well, as you pointed out, she really never had the God thing. You know, there was always like a doubt, like, I don't know if I believe this.
Well, it's
yet she pursued.
It's consistent with her protective mechanism.
Yeah.
Just almost the same way that she kept people at a distance. She kept God at a distance. Yeah. And she wasn't going to let anybody in, let alone, you know, a deity. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it protected her from, you know, ever really giving her heart to something. I mean, she was baptized. She probably said the sinner's prayer at some point, but she just, she's able to wink as she's saying things to people. Like even now when somebody says, I'll pray for you, she's like, great, you know, and I'll pray for you. And wink. It's just an acceptance of what is. I think she's a yes sayer.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we've ever had a guest on the show that, well, first of all, she came in like, well, just like she said, she was fine. You know, I mean, we rolled tape when she sat down. Yeah. So there was no like warm up time. This
she
girl is right. Yeah, she's right there.
Well,
so.
Even it was kind of funny because I went to the door. Yeah. To welcome her in, and a lot of times somebody will stand there for a second and just say hey, or reach out their hand, and do a little introduction. And I think it's probably because she knew she was late, so this is probably why. But I opened the door and she just walked right past me.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, no, very
And she's
good.
a small framed person, so she's got a largeness to her that kind of says, I'm here.
Yeah, no, she's excellent. Really wonderful guest and a nice person. So we're very lucky to have her. And,
fascinating. Human beings, man. Truth is stranger than fiction. Everybody's got a story, and kind of want to hear her sing. Yeah.
All right, man. Well,
we did it again.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Over and over.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Let's do it again.
It's always something new. Thanks, man.
See ya.